For blood test number 2 in 2023, we saw that my biological age using Dr. Morgan Levine's PhenoAge was 17 years younger than my chronological. Similarly, when using aging.ai, we saw that it was 23 years younger than my chronological. So with that in mind, what's contributing to these data? So let's start off with supplements. And if you saw the first video in this series, you saw that I supplemented with NMN with an average NMN intake of 340 milligrams per day. And that was for the 42-day period from the day of the last test, so test number 1 on January 23rd, 2023, through the day before blood test number 2, March 5th of 2023. So that 42-day period, I averaged 340 milligrams per day of NMN. And note that for the 7 consecutive day period before blood test number 2 in 2023, I averaged 1,000 milligrams of NMN per day. But note that there was no dramatic improvement or worsening of biological age data in the presence of NMN. First, when looking at Levine's data, we can see that I've had values at least as low as where it was for this test. And similarly for aging.ai, at least 4 measurements that were as low as the recent 27 without using NMN for aging.ai. All right, so that brings us to the other 2 supplements that are usually on my list, or most of the time on my list. I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism in my 20s, so I've been taking levothyroxine since then. For about 8 to 9 months out of the year, the non-summer months, I supplement with vitamin D, 1,000 IUs per day. And that's it for supplements. No other purported geroprotectors or senolytics. Which then brings us to diet. So what diet composition corresponds to this test? So note that this is the average 42-day period from the day of the last test through the day before test number 2 in 2023. And then we can see that I ate 47 different things, or there were 47 different things on the list. Some of these are supplements, so it's not all food. And then this list is ranked in terms of grams, starting from the highest and going to the lowest. Now, note that these foods and food amounts have been purposely consistent for the past few tests. And that's because after 40 plus blood tests since 2015, this diet, including macros and micronutrients, is consistently associated with relatively youthful biomarker data in my case, with a few exceptions, of course. And for those who are familiar with the channel, that includes my Horvath epigenetic age, homocysteine, and DHEA sulfate as examples. Now, note that glycine is on the list here, but it wasn't on the supplement list. And I continued glycine supplementation for a few days after blood test number 1, but I stopped after I got the homocysteine data. And if you remember, I was trying to reduce homocysteine by taking glycine, and that experiment didn't work. Now, my diet isn't always purposefully clean. I make sure I include at least 1 cheat day, at most 2. If I go more than 2, I start to crave junk food, and I don't like that feeling. So for this test, there was 1 cheat day in between that 42-day period. And I tried the TikTok trend of stuffing peanut butter and dates and then putting it in chocolate. And to be honest, it wasn't that great. But so the cheat day had a full chocolate bar with some peanut butter and then with dates, which aren't junk. All right, so this list is ranked in grams. Which foods are top contributors for calories? And that's what we can see here. And note that this list is tracked with Chronometer, which I've used since 2015. And if you're interested in tracking your own diet with Chronometer, there'll be a discount link in the video's description. So first, what I'd like to highlight is energy or average daily calorie intake, which for this test, for that 42-day period, was 2177 calories per day. And just to put that into perspective, this is my lowest average daily calorie intake since I started tracking diet in April of 2015. And my previous low was actually for test number 1 in 2023, where the average calorie intake was 2194 calories per day. Now, atop the list are sardines in terms of calories per day. And then also notice that this is the same top 10 foods that I also had for test number 1, which with some variation in the order, but the same foods in terms of which foods are actually on the list, in part because the biomarkers are looking mostly youthful. All right, what about macronutrient composition? So first, let's start off with protein intake. Average was 95.3 grams per day, which it equates to 17.5% of total calories. So what about fat intake? That's what we can see here. Average daily fat intake for that 42-day period that corresponds to this blood test was 82.3 grams, which is 34% of total calories. And if you're interested in the full fat breakdown, including monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, omega-3, omega-6, and so on, that's all there too. All right, so that brings us to carbohydrate intake. So in terms of carbohydrate intake, starting from the top, we can see that it was about 302 grams per day, which seems like a lot, but note that net carbs equals total carbs minus fiber. So for this test, the average daily fiber intake is pretty close to where it's been for many tests, about 86 grams per day. And when subtracting that from total carbs, we get a net carbs of 217 grams per day. Now, when multiplied that by 4 calories per gram and dividing it by total calories, or the average daily calorie intake, we can see that my net carbs is 39.9% of total calories. Now, note that amongst fiber is comprised of insoluble, which is generally not fermented by gut bacteria, and soluble, which is fermented by gut bacteria into short-chain fatty acids. In other words, some fraction of that fiber is fermented into fat. Now, with that in mind, fiber then contributes 2.2 calories per gram. And when multiplied by about 86 grams of fiber, we can add 189 calories from fiber, which is 8.7% of total calories. We can add that to total fat as that fiber is converted into these short-chain fatty acids. So with that in mind, now we can see that my net macros are about 43% fat, about 40% net carbs, and 17.5% protein. Now, digging a little deeper, I do track total sugar intake. More specifically, I track fructose, total fructose intake, and that's because of the high strawberry amounts, and then also carrots and beets have a very high fructose amount, and relatively higher fructose in my data is associated with more biomarkers going in the wrong direction than right. So I try to keep my fructose intake relatively low. For this test, it was 58.1 grams. Note that sucrose is half fructose, so 39.5 plus 37 divided by 2 yields a total fructose of 58 grams per day. And to put that into perspective, that's close to my lowest fructose intake since starting diet tracking in 2015. My previous low was, for the previous test, it was 58.5 grams of fructose per day. All right, so that brings us then to micronutrients. How does that look for this test? So you may have to go full screen to see the vitamins. I wanted to get it all on one slide, but the full vitamins and full minerals are shown there. And first, note that there is full RDA coverage for all vitamins and minerals. But then digging deeper, many micronutrients are purposefully higher than the RDA as I try to follow their correlations with blood biomarkers. And just to highlight a few, so niacin and folate, you can see about 42 milligrams per day for niacin, about 1,000 micrograms for folate. That's about 2.5 times the RDA. Magnesium's RDA is 400 milligrams per day. So I'm approaching twofold there, a little bit under twofold higher than the RDA. But being twofold higher than the RDA isn't a hard and fast rule because we can see that for vitamin K, that's 17 times the RDA. And again, this is trying to follow the data with the blood biomarkers as vitamin K is significantly correlated with more biomarkers going in the right direction than wrong. All right, that's all for now. If you're interested in more about my attempts to biohack aging, check us out on Patreon. And before you go, we've got a whole bunch of discount links and merch that you may be interested in, including discount links for NAD quantification, green tea, epigenetic testing, oral microbiome composition, at-home blood testing, diet tracking, or if you'd like to support the channel, you can do that with the website, Buy Me a Coffee. We've also got merch, so if you're interested in wearing the Conquer Aging or Diet Trying brand, that link and all of the other links for the discounts will be in the video's description. Thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed the video. Have a great day.